much for coming today. I can't believe that I'm lucky enough to have hauled you out of your gardens. It's probably because we had a frost last night. I didn't see half of you. But anyway, thanks very much for coming. I'm excited that people in Tiverton are interested. Mostly our studies based on Aquidneck Island and Jamestown, but we did it with an eye towards developing coexistence strategies for living with coyotes in Rhode Island. And we hope that they'll help you too, and that you'll find our results maybe applicable to your area. Before I start, I wondered if I could take a brief poll of who's here because they're concerned about coyotes, concerned and a little bit worried. Is okay? Yep, okay. So, and then the other group would be because they're interested in wildlife, I'm guessing? Is that another,
Yeah.
Who's here because they're interested in wildlife, open space? The lion's share. Okay, I think I'll have something for both of you groups. And I would have said though, when I gave a talk, my first talk on the Narragansett Bay Coyote study when we were just kicking it off in 2005, the room would have been overwhelmingly a concerned room. And so it's kind of interesting for me to see the switch that's occurring. I think people are starting to get reassured a little bit, and I hope to reassure those of you who aren't. Is that focused for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, due to the kindness of a whole bunch of enthusiastic volunteers, we've been running about a $450,000 a year program for about, well, I won't want to admit it. And this man here, Ralph Pratt of the West Greenwich Animal Hospital, was a lab mate of mine, and we were getting our advanced degrees. He's our chief veterinarian, wonderful guy. And Lynn Malone and also Lynn Maloney, two different people of the Potter League, have been very much championing the education portion with school kids. I'm working more now on reaching out, that we have some answers. I'm reaching out to the adult public, and the Potter League is really excited about that as well. So we've teamed up with Potter League and also now the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, which I'm tickled pink about. This began in 2005, and the original name of the talk. So you can see how things have changed. People were upset because pets were disappearing and coyotes were increasingly being seen even in urban areas. Now, from the get-go, because I had a sneaking suspicion that this would turn out okay, we combined two components for this study. The first was science. That's what I do, and I develop any excuse to do it. And I was really interested because the coyote is not originally distributed here. Although it's a native North American mammal, as you all know, it was originally a prairie animal. So I was really excited because I was getting a chance to study the invasion, basically, of a new native top predator. You got this predator before Aquidneck Island and Jamestown because we were islands. So we, it took a little longer. And so by the time they got to Jamestown and Aquidneck Island, people were jumpy enough so I could get the scratch to run the study. But when I started the study, I thought it would have a happy ending and one that everyone would enjoy. And I sort of rolled the dice on this a little bit. But because I had an idea that I might be right, the dice that I rolled were to entwine an educational component. At the time, I didn't think it would be as important as it is. I thought it was an incredible opportunity for school kids to study science as it was happening. When do you get to look at, how the top of a food web influences the biological community? And in the way that we're doing it, it's really exciting. So what a super thing to involve school kids and say, okay, science isn't all done now. You're doing it now. Okay, we're going to be finding out things. And so we gave 15 schools in the first year GIS, which you've probably heard of through the Land Trust, I have no doubt, and it's a layering system of digital map layers, and so the kids could actually examine our data with it and overlay it on their own neighborhoods. was very exciting. So from the get-go, we've had a lively website that sort of reveals our findings as we get them. And you're all invited to go there. If you Google coyote study, I think we come up on top. So that's a very easy way to get there. And we also have this fun thing, is if you live on Aquidneck Island, which is Portsmouth, Middletown, and Newport, or Jamestown, you can use the zoom in tool on our coyote mapper, which is hosted by the Providence Plan, and zoom in on your neighborhood, and underneath will appear ortho photographs of your house, and you'll also see our coyotes in your yard. And you can figure out when just by clicking on them, which is a lot of fun for people in these areas. So I'll give you a quick rundown on coyote biology. As I mentioned, they were originally a prairie animal, but with the deforestation and extirpation of the timber wolf, gray wolf, they moved up and over. And say 1900, they were just like this. And as you can see, by the 50s, the 60s, they were moving fast, and they came up and over through wolf country to get to us. And we have our own subspecies, Canis latrans thamnos, which is a big, big animal compared to the Midwestern scruffy little ones. So they're pretty impressive, and they look quite wolf-like. And by the 60s, I think there was the first record in Warren around 68. And now, they's everywhere. So they're a great animal to have in the ecosystem. They control the natural community, and they're big mousers, which is an important thing. We need animals that eat mice. They also love anything that's easy. They're completely omnivorous. And if they can catch them, squirrels. Woodchucks are so slow. Have you noticed the numbers of woodchucks have gone down?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. My phone calls from my mother have also gone down because I hate those things. she used to call me weekly to give me the woodchuck report. Yay, coyote. Okay, they also love rabbits, and so as you can see, they're performing an important role in our ecosystem. They also may be performing the role of spreading seeds, because 20% of the diet of coyotes is fruit. And then the other question that I was interested in is, because we have such deer issues, and this is the case in Tiverton too, right?
Yes.
You've got an overabundance of deer. Would coyotes assist with the sorry, I get blinded by this.
Do you want me to change it for you?
No, it's okay if you don't mind me going like this. One of the questions that we are addressing is, could coyotes replace the wolf as a native predator of deer? And that would be a real pro, another real pro, because we really need to keep those deer numbers down. And in the urban areas or in the suburban rural environment, the deer are not up with the houses, and you can't go blasting rifles and trying to control deer around urban or suburban areas. So coyotes are very good at trucking right through neighborhoods, as doubtless some of you know. And once deer came down, it might be more something you wouldn't be aware of. It would be restricted to woodlands. But in fact, I'm a little disappointed in the coyote in this regard. They haven't really turned out to be very good deer predators. They love to eat already killed for them deer, however. So they often eat roadkills, and we find deer hair in the scats all the time. But I do have one pack that is a deer preying pack. And the significance of this is really, it's really an important thing for me to look at. And I'll talk to you about it later, the significance of this one pack eating deer. The cons of coyotes, I have to mention, which is a lot of really wonderful pets have disappeared because of coyotes. But our program is designed also to minimize this kind of disturbance through education and law. The study is only possible because actually Diana Prince is my principal funder, Prince Charitable Trust. Her dog got eaten by a coyote. Aww. And I told her, she said, all right, I'm going to fund a coyote study. That's it. And I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. I'll do coyote science, and I'll try to figure out what's going on and why they're so numerous, but it's not going to be agenda-based. And she said, all right. And so, to her great credit, she let me catch one right in her yard and let it go. So last on the coyote biology is just some other neat facts about them. Sometimes they're solitary or live in pairs. Usually those are the transient individuals, but the packs of coyotes are basically family groups, and they tend to be mother, father, some of last year's offspring, and this year's offspring. And so alphas and betas, they call them, or transients. And I'll show you a little picture of what that looks like later. They're very territorial, and this is going to be key to coexisting with coyotes. What I've found out over 2 years is there's good coyotes and bad coyotes. And the good coyotes eat rabbits, woodchucks, squirrels, and the bad coyotes eat kibbles and bits and puppies. And so if you have good coyotes, you want to keep them around because they're territorial, and they will keep out all other coyotes, including the bad ones. So how do you get good coyotes? I'm going to walk us there through this talk. Okay, they also mate only once per year, and so we just had that happen. And by it's actually Christmas when they start getting interested in each other, the alpha male and female of the pack, the mom and pop. And they tend to get tense with the teenagers at that point and shove them out. And then by about Valentine's Day, the female's pregnant. Now, this last fact is what's going to be the real key to this talk, is that coyotes control their own populations based on the food they have. So if that female, at that time she becomes impregnated, is fat and healthy and glossy-furred, she's going to have more puppies than if she were stressed and tense and other coyotes were coming into her territory to see what she possibly had there. And in that case, coyotes actually resort young that they can't feel they can support. So, and also they control birth rate by simply not having younger females breed. Like the alpha mom's daughters won't breed the first year or second year, depending on how much food there is. So this little nugget of information was what I thought we should work with. Because I decided to approach this back in 2004, actually, before we even got to work, by using GPS collars like this one that'll record the study coyote's position every hour to see exactly what resources he was using and what was making them potentially so abundant. Okay, if we could figure those out, we reasoned, if we can, and those resources are within our control, we could potentially lower coyote numbers. So that was the start of the study. And right now is puppy season, which I think of as tax time, as puppy season. And they are now, the mothers are now in dens with very tiny puppies. And then very shortly, soon, soon, they're going to abandon those dens and start having the puppies out in the open where they stay for the rest of the year. Okay, so in this study we're collecting regional data that have never been collected anywhere in the U.S. before because no one has ever used a fine-scale method of tracking coyotes like this collar. But this is the standard things that mammalogists and ecologists do. How far do they roam? How big's their territory? Where are the dens? How many are there in the packs? That's the toughest thing to decide. And how dense are the packs? What are they eating? And again, we use these GPS collars, and we're counting them using motion-activated video in their core areas. And we also hope to be using DNA fingerprinting to determine how many individuals are in the pack. Now, here's how we do it. Now this coyote is Mrs. Prince's coyote, Hazard, and he's in a foothold trap right now. And we use these traps very effectively, and we have a terrific safety record. What they do is close but not completely. And in the gap, they have a rubber pad. And so basically, we use small enough traps so that they just close in between the toe pads. Picture your dog with the callus toe pads and then the heel pad on the front foot. There's a groove in between. We catch our coyotes to catch in that groove, and basically the traps just hold their hand until we get there. And you can see Hazard here waiting for us patiently. Then Ralph knocks them out and draws blood. We're looking for heartworm. We also can look at relatedness, how they colonized the islands, and do some of these counts that we're hoping to do with microsatellite DNA. Now, then the next thing, we have about 20 minutes to work on them while the coyotes are still knocked out. This one's white tip, and if we have the time today, he'll show up later in a video. See his white tip tail. And we put the collar on, tighten her up. And the thing that's neat about this collar is that it has this device here, which is an automatic release. The collar batteries are not necessarily too reliable. They don't last quite as long as I thought, but this thing doesn't have a battery. It doesn't use its battery until the one time it deploys, which is a year after capture. So we generally shoot for a record of 12 months for each coyote, and then you hear a little snick, like it's like an electrical shock snick, where a little bolt draws back and the collar drops off. If the collar's still running, we can find it, if the signal is still running. But every day, this transmits to us the positions of the coyotes 24 hours a day. So the coyote's sleeping it off, and then Ralph injects the antidote. And about 5 minutes later, I start looking at Ralph and shuffling around and saying, should we be worrying? And Ralph, he's about 6'4", he says, nope. And he goes, and this is what happens. Coyote suddenly takes off, and that's the last view of it generally we have till the next year. They're very secretive. Oops. That was a boo-boo. Somehow I got back. Wait a minute, I'm going to have to get out. That's a cartoon I'm going to put in the paper next week. Sorry, guys. I wonder how to... I got to figure this out. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go start from the get-go and then run through it again, just quick. You find something out about computers every day that you didn't know. When you hit that little end button, it goes to the end. Okay, that didn't take too long. Okay, so here's some of the data that we've been finding. Each one of these, each different color represents another coyote pack. And you can see that on Aquidneck Island, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 packs collared there, and on Jamestown, 1, 2, 3. But you can also see that there are little gaps. Now, this is the city of Newport Gap. Fortunately, it's not occupied. But right here is Glen Farm, and I think there's what I call a phantom pack there that we haven't trapped yet. But this pack sort of acts like there's some barrier to it expanding northward. There's a few little points, but basically this pack has a territory here. And so you can see these are made up of, this is made up of about 4 coyotes that we followed. And they all occupy the same territory or yard. They're very strict about it. And the Newport coyotes, Newport Neck coyotes, that's where Hazard was in Mrs. Prince's yard. And you can also see that between each pack, there's often a sort of a DMZ where the coyotes, just sort of say, okay, they have an agreement about it. But interestingly enough, And I should say that this is the way it stays from summer through December. But remember when I said that the mom and dad, the alpha male and female, kick out the teenagers, basically, at Christmas time? Well, this is what it looks like then. I mean, it just gets all messed up. So here's a coyote that was from this pack, this pink one. You can see that she's all the way, look, she's standing on the stone bridge. Thinking about, geez, she's ready to get off of Quidnick Island. There was nowhere for her to go. She's also down here at Breton Point. And so, but you also can kind of see that in a lot of cases, and here too, see this purple one here? This one is white tip, the one that I was measuring in that photo. And sorry about the pillars, I can see some of you are straining around. When white tip's parents started breeding, they kicked him out. You can kind of see that he's all around the edges, the way this one is CB. She was also kind of in the interstices. I think of it as a tile and mortar analogy. The territories of the packs, family groups, are like tiles, and the transients are sort of the mortar. They stay in the mortar between the tiles, or the DMZs. And then eventually, here's where this picture is a little confusing because it includes where she finally settled down. She started with this pack here and ended up living with a Portsmouth pack. And so here she is sleeping in the center again. So she started with this center, rambled all over the island, and ended up in the yellow guys. Okay. And when you look at how much space they use, it's a lot. The transients roam average of almost 25 kilometers squared. And the established coyotes only patrol, have territories of about 5 kilometers squared, 3.5 miles or so. But now, this is a sloppy mess, but when you look at where they actually spend most of their time, look at that. 70% of their time is spent in the color of their pack, in these core areas. See that? And so, all around, if you have run into coyote scat in your rambles, you are, in our experience, running through a coyote core area, because they mark those areas with scat. Now this is previously unknown, but it's kind of neat, because it's sort of like, we know from Yellowstone work on coyotes that they will, just like dogs, pee around the perimeter of their territory and to keep other coyotes out. But it's never previously been known that in these core areas, these special sleeping spots that they spend a lot of time in, and have their puppies in, and well, they spend all day in them. And, in those areas, they put out a signpost. You'll see it dropping out there, and it's usually on a main trail. Often there'll be several. It's sort of, if you see this sign,
You're in the wrong place.
yeah, that's it. And so that's kind of a neat thing. But really, look at how tiny the. Did I say what the core size is? 70% contour, less than a kilometer for an established pack. That's it. 70% of their time in a square kilometer. Okay, and when we talk about some of those core areas, you can see what's so neat about them. And this is where open space is so important. And, I really do think that the coyote, when they're not, troublesome coyotes, when they're not bad coyotes, are a wonderful asset for the ecosystem. And they show you the value of habitat corridors and maintaining connectivity for wildlife. For instance, here you can see with Jamestown that they obviously use these green areas. And the green areas in this picture, dark green, are wetlands and forest and brushland. But ever since wetlands protection in 72 or 6, I forget, Wetlands Protection Act, the forest has succeeded in a lot of places and also can't be developed. And so those areas are very important to coyotes. But you'll also see them in areas where there's anything about 500 square feet. A coyote will sleep in the day and basically evaporate. You will never know they're there. And they is all around us. On this illustration, the red dots are where the coyotes are during the day, and in other words, stopped. Red is for stop, and it's probably sleeping. And then yellow is for action, and they're out. But you can see this is the town of Jamestown, and this is Newport Bridge. And you can see, you know, they really would rather, it appears, not be in town. So it really looked to us that the population was thriving when we first started this in 2005. And when we dissected roadkills, did necropsies on roadkills, we'd find their intestines were laden with fat. They looked like a guy with a beer gut, you know. It was just like a 100% cheese diet. We were thinking, what is with these coyotes? Where are they getting all of their nutrition? Now this is where some of these data started to kind of jump out at us. But it was sort of a slow process. You know, I say my brain, she's tiny, but she's working all the time. And that's kind of the way it was. I didn't figure it out all in one big eureka moment. It crawled on me. And so one of the first examples of what was wrong with how we were living with coyotes was from this family. It's the Peckham Pack. Have you guys been to Norman Bird Sanctuary?
Yeah.
That's part of their core territory. And this is all coyotes from the same family, and this is our current one named Buck, and I love him because of his ridiculous nose, and it's just large-ish. And then these are all his moms or sibs. This is probably his mom. Her name's Trinity. Whoa. All right, now, remember I told you about the territory and then the territory after Christmas. So when they're transferred, this is Peckham's territory before Christmas. Now I showed you this color code before and outlined it. Norman Bird Sanctuary is here, Satchwest Point Nature Reserve, the Peckham Sand and Gravel, the quarry there. Oh, sorry, right under this spot was Peckham Sand and Gravel. Now, this was what that territory looked like when we first began to study it. And when we looked at it, and even after Christmas, when the parents kicked Peckham out, he didn't want to leave. He was just sitting right there on a territory the size of a postage stamp. And so naturally, we looked at it a different way. When we plotted the points in 3 dimensions, we got this mountain of points. That what we do there is the points of each coyote. When the coyote's running around on the island and his collar talks to the satellites at the top of every hour and takes a position, I get just spots all over the island, which is what I've been showing you. And if I look at those as, if I take the islands and I grid them up and make a checkerboard, and then I put a checker every time there's a coyote spot in a particular square, and then I drape a tablecloth over it, that's the picture we're getting here, because I have a lot of checkers in this spot. So naturally, and that's a lot of GPS positions, so naturally, I went there. Okay. All right, so I guess it's best that I can tell you. When I went there, I found dead sheep. And I also found dead deer. And so first of all, I asked, what's with sheep? And this farmer over here took his dead sheep that were winter killed and dropped them off in Peckham Sand and Gravel Quarry. Okay, well then the guys there noticed that the coyotes started coming to the sheep, and this coyote photographer that was there too said, wow, I've got a whole bunch of deer. He was a hunter, and he said, I'll just dump my deer here and get these great photos of coyotes. And so he was dumping deer, they were dumping sheep. And remember I told you I had one pack of coyotes that specialized in preying on deer? Okay.
They learned.
That is the take-home word. They learned. They also learned to eat sheep. And here, see the square? That square is the summer points of that pack, pacing the boundaries of the sheep fence across the street. See? And so they actually had made trenches where they went in. They took about 30 sheep from this farm. They went under this special NRCS high tensile wire, dug this giant channel, and were dragging sheep underneath this super electric fence. And so when I pointed this all out to the farmer, he was laughing. He was a bit of a gentleman farmer, and so obviously the income wasn't critical. So he suddenly realized, yeah, this is kind of dumb. He had sheep scree marks going across his pasture.
He wasn't raising sheep, he was feeding coyotes.
That's what he was doing. So what this did was generate a sheep predator, but Roland, the photographer, generated a deer predator. And I thought, whoa, that's really cool, because in 2006, we had 3 deer killed on Sechuas Point by this pack. So now that's interesting. They can learn to kill sheep, but they could also learn to kill deer. So I'm just grinding this one along, but that could be useful later on. Okay, now you see some other mountain peaks, and I'll go through them. But I can do it from here. Okay, this is Newport Country Club is a big peak for this group, and I don't really know why, but I do think there's a family in there that might have something to do with it, but I'll go into that later. And this is how it should look. Okay, see this? No big main center. These are good coyotes. These are the South Portsmouth pack. They're on Steve DeCastro's farm, and he takes occasional shots at them. And he's not that good a shot, which is good. not just for my collared one and me, because they take a lot of effort to get, but mostly because if you shoot at them and wing them or miss them, they learn. Okay, and these guys are mostly my mousers. And they do eat the occasional feral cat, but they're mostly mousers, and you can see them running along Burma Road. The peaks are running along Burma Road, Portsmouth Abbey down to the Navy base. Okay, and then we get to Jamestown. It gets a little complicated, but this one's funny. Some of these I don't know why they're peaks. There may be good sleeping spots, good core areas, but this one is due to Barbara Sepetowski. And she is a town councilor on Jamestown who's also was Paws and Claws, a pet shelter. And she was upset because her neighbor was letting her cats out. And the cats would be, she would let them out at night, and Barbara knew there were coyotes patrolling around, and she was afraid the coyotes would eat the cats. So her logic was, I'll just leave out dog food for the coyotes, and then they'll be too full to eat the cats. Wrong. You can see that logic did not work. It was, and interesting to me is, not only did it make white tip, the at-home coyote there, spend a tremendous amount of time there, it also pulled in animals from other packs. And one of the things I noticed is one of the only things that makes an established or territorial coyote trespass is handouts. So, yeah, I think I made that point. Okay, now, okay, so, all right, and this is another neat one, and I'm going to try to segue to this video. This is, I call Mount Holstein. Okay, just see if I can get this. Mount Holstein. All right. Okay, so far so good, kind of. Now, how do I? It's funny that it's just a part. Okay, let me see if I can get this stuff. Hey, all right, so far so good. All right. Can you recognize that thing in the back?
Yeah.
It's a dead cow. See it? And what this coyote is going into is another dead cow that's running perpendicular to that cow, and what you can't see is the other cow that's lying around, and this is in 2006. Now, this is how I count coyotes. See this one just a little black on the tail? That one has a lot. You'll see them in a second. That's the second one. You see, so I can, this is my motion activated video, and this stick I cleverly placed there to disguise the camera. Look how this guy comes in. This is white tip. See how scared he is? He's a transient at this point. He's a marauder. And he's discovered the cow, and his tail, you can tell it's different. Watch him as he eats. His tail is curled and it's got a white tip. See him? He's worried about the other ones getting him from behind. But these coyotes feasted on this pile of cows. Now, why was the pile of cows there? Nobody's fault. There was a winter kill of breeding, calving Holsteins on a farm in Jamestown. And what happened was, what was the farmer supposed to do? It's in the middle of the winter, and he can't bury them. And there is no haul-away service for dead livestock. So the strange thing is here these coyotes are being very happily trained to eat the thing that the farmer's trying to produce. So we've applied for some funding from NRC. Here's the owner. See how the, oh, what's the deal here? Okay, what? Hey, who was that? Anyway, we'll get back to the other part. If I can just do it.
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to meet one.
They're actually really shy.
Really?
When I go up to them, I net them, and they fall over every time, and I just grab their neck. Okay, next. Okay, so now here comes another story. So now we have the subsidization from farm livestock. We also know that deer are very important, and there are a lot of road kills around in Rhode Island, and the coyotes maximize their use of those. Our GPS points would show every time there was a road kill, the coyotes would be pinging on them. Now here's Newport Neck Pack. This is kind of a interesting story because you know about poor Mrs. Prince and her little Jack Russell, Gus. Okay, well this was 2005. Okay, so I was about to give a talk at the Jamestown Library, and this had been bugging me. This is Mrs. Prince's house, and Hazard had been spending from the 4th to the 17th of November in coyote business hours. Now here red just means the color code for the Newport Neck Coyote. He's here in business hours, nighttime, every night from the 4th to the 17th of November. So I said, well, he's eating something there. So I called Mrs. Prince and I said, Diana, do you think your neighbors are feeding coyotes? And she said, don't be ridiculous. Who would do something, that kind of thing. And then I asked also my friend at the other end of the street, same response. Well, I guess where would you have driven up? So I was giving this talk and I wanted to put the period at the end of the sentence, so I drove up the driveway and I knocked on the most likely door, and this really nice couple came out, and I said, hi, Numi Mitchell, Narragansett Bay Coyote Study. Seen any coyotes? And they go, well, actually, yes. They started to enthuse about it, and then they'd say how beautiful they were, and then they said, well, actually, we feed them. And I said, I know! And I gave them a big hug, and I said, well, now don't anymore, because they're eating your neighbor's dog. They cut through, right? So,
What were they feeding them?
they were scraps, and now I know this is so common. I was such a fool to not know this was going on. Every single one of my packs, except for the DeCastro pack, is fed by people. And all it takes, you can see how much space each pack occupies. So within that 5 square kilometers, all you need is one family to be training these coyotes to come in and expect food from people. And that's when you start to get the coyotes that stare at you. Have you seen that, anyone? You get out of your car and they just, and you say, well, you're a wild thing, why aren't you running? And he's saying, Oreos? Kentucky Fried? Anyway.
Because they resemble a dog so much, don't they?
They're just as smart as dogs are
Except
smart.
they look a little more scrawnier than dogs. Their eyes are a little bit slanted.
Well, they're pretty. I don't know. You
Yeah,
should
they're
see
really
some of
pretty.
these eyes. I'll show you some more pictures and you can see if you think they're slanted. It depends what they're doing. This is a picture of Mrs. Prince's mountain. This is the effect that one family feeding has. So we have the Newport
Wow.
Neck where they live at Newport Country Club, and here's where they go to snack. So they promised not to if I didn't ever say what their name was. So I never do.
Look, it looks like it's stretching.
So anyway, this was the big eye-opener for us, so that if you're thinking about living with coyotes, obviously the take-home point is going to be don't Feed them. We found that, as I said, road-killed deer, and then also deer that get shot for the best, even though hunters make the best efforts to always retrieve the animals that they shoot. Occasionally they miss one and bam, 150 pounds of meat for coyotes, you know? And then dead livestock, I can't explain how huge that is, you know? Because those animals often die in the wintertime, right during reproductive season, and that's going to make the coyotes implant more young. We're going to have bigger litter sizes, and they're going to be expecting food from people. And then the last queer one, people feeding feral cats. This I haven't stressed, but of course it's not doing much favor to the cats, because it's a feral cat feeding station is a magnet for coyotes, as we saw from Barbara Sepetowski's mountain of points. And so they're going to eat the cat food, and then they're going to eat the cats.
The cats don't have to be feral either.
No, they don't. It's exactly true. If you make a feeding station on your back porch, don't expect to be seeing your cat much longer either. And so, yeah, there's some things maybe we can go over if you guys want to ask any questions about what's safe and what's non-safe. But basically, since we started, and I think I already stole my thunder earlier by saying that every single pack is subsidized in some way by people. And directly or indirectly, this could be a compost pile or different ways. Cats, feeding them cats. And so, again, since their population growth is determined by how much food they have, this is a dumb idea, and so we've got to think of how to decrease the amount of food we provide to coyotes, and then we'll be able to live with them a lot better. Okay, so we're calling this passive coyote management, and this was what I suspected we'd end up getting to when I started this. But if we aggressively control ourselves, the coyotes will bring down their own numbers. And so we're going to measure it with a number of responses. Like, we're going to be looking closely at territory size, the number of territories. If we have less food for coyotes per square inch, the territory size should get bigger, right? Because the family's going to need more food, more land to support itself. So like that Portsmouth pack of good coyotes I showed you, they should get larger territory sizes and perhaps fewer numbers of coyotes per pack. And what else? And we'll also have fewer roadkills and fewer coyote complaints. So we should aggressively manage ourselves, and we will passively manage coyotes. So now, in another neat way, we're playing with our data. We're using our coyote points in the Aquidneck Island Special Areas Management Plan. And what I do is I have a nifty program that automatically and within seconds connects the 30,000 data points I now have, and from time 1 to time 2, and creates pathways over the islands. And so we talk about habitat corridors, but the coyotes tell us where they are. And what I do is then I plot them in 3 dimensions with spatial analysis. And what you get is mountain ridges in the most hotly used areas. Here's a ridge. Remember the Burma Road picture? Okay, Burma Road is actually a very important conservation area. And you can also see burned into the landscape Satchwest Point to the Norman Bird Sanctuary. And Jamestown's interesting too, because the coyotes really tend to make their core areas around streams. And this complete corridor is based around wetlands and the Jamestown Brook system. But also, because we put 138, this crazy connector here, the DOT put wildlife tunnels down through, and they work super. The coyotes use them, except in the rainy seasons when they get flooded, because coyotes really don't like to get their feet wet. They cross the road at that time and tend to get hit. So it's interesting. We see a lot of them using that corridor, and we need to do something about it, like elevate the wildlife tunnels.
Where's the spot up in Portsmouth
That spot, let's see, that's going to be, okay, that's where 24 splits from 114. There's a big bunch of woods that goes sort of south of the Portsmouth Business District. And then also we have Boyd's Lane up here, which is pretty good too. They go through there all the time. And so you get the idea, but the coyote data, we're using them as a sort of because they're a mammal that needs a lot of room. They also, they'll help show us what habitats are valuable to other species that also need room, like predatory birds, otters, and minks, and foxes, and things, owls.
Could I ask you what their lifespan time is?
It depends if they get heartworm, because they can die in about 4 years if they get heartworm, and they can live about 13 years if they
And
don't.
the pups can live and exist without their mom and pop?
Depends how old they are, but they're
Yeah.
quite like dog puppies that way. But because they stay and help each other after the pups are born, like some of the older sisters and brothers might stick around. If the parents are killed, often the puppies will still survive because of the helpers, den helpers.
Do we have any coyotes here in Tiverton?
You bet you do. And I wish I could study them. Wouldn't it be fun to extend the study
I'd
here?
like to know that because I
One
just
of my
moved here.
questions that I've been wanting to ask is, what is the effect on the local
Oh, imagine
fox
just 4 years.
population when you have coyotes? What happens if they were a pretty intricate part before the coyote, and
Yeah.
how do they survive after?
Yeah, that was sort of that's sort of how I wanted to begin studying this, because when I first wanted to do this a dozen years ago, I thought, wow, how interesting to add a coyote on top of an already existing fox population. We have reds and gray foxes. But pretty much without exception, there's a real crash in the fox population after the addition of coyotes.
But are they still there?
Yeah, they
Okay.
are. They do come back. And this isn't just through me, this is through, just shooting the breeze with trappers and all that stuff. Yes, they do come back. And I've seen this on Nashan Island, Massachusetts, read about it, and it seems to be happening on Jamestown and Aquidneck Island. I have foxes in both places, so yeah.
Is that because they're competing for the same food?
To some degree, but coyotes are traditionally, and I don't know why, intolerant of foxes. They just don't seem to like them. They don't eat them, they just kill them. And the same with wolves and coyotes. So it's sort of a kick the cat thing. You know what I mean?
Probably a dominant canine, that's why.
Yeah, must be. I mean, they did eventually get around to eating the dead foxes, but mostly it does seem to be just a sort of an intolerance thing.
But your evidence is anecdotal, or is it empirical, as far as the population rebound on the red fox?
Anecdotal from conversation. But there also is some in the literature, so yeah, you could.
So there's been empirical studies done on population rebound?
Yeah, but I can't list them out right here because it would be about the fox, and I haven't, I'm not that familiar with the fox literature. But yeah, and the trappers track this as, I get it a lot through the trappers. So it's anecdotal, but they're multiple anecdotes. And personally, I've seen it. That's it.
Do they eat little-sized dogs?
Yes, they would eat, I'm guessing up to 25-pound dogs very readily. If larger dogs are tied and unable to get away, or older dogs that were slightly larger, those would be in jeopardy. I don't really recommend leaving any pets unsupervised. And some lady once asked me, well, I feel like a prisoner in my own home. Can I put my baby in the yard in a stroller and it's 6 weeks old and go inside? And I thought,
So we have the good coyotes here, right?
I don't know if you have the good coyotes. You tell me. Does anybody have good coyotes? You have good
Our
coyotes?
woodchuck population and our rabbit population have gone down. It was the foxes, but then when Starwoods moved in, the foxes moved out, and now we've got coyotes.
What's
So,
Starwoods?
it's the villages of Mount Hope Bay.
Oh, okay.
It's a 55 and older condominium.
So
So when
when
they
they
built
moved-
all that up, the foxes moved out, because that's where they were moving. And then there was one coyote that came across and So now he's been getting our woodchucks and stuff, so yeah, we have good coyotes.
And you almost had one of mine, because one of mine got chased off of Aquidneck Island by, it was interesting. Here's a neat anecdote that really is, it's slowly we're accumulating really cool evidence. And one of the things that happened with that Peckham pack I told you about, that was eating the sheep and deer, was like, boing, okay, I know what's going on. So I told the photographer guy, and I talked to the farmer, and I used to put out carcasses there to video, you know, like I did with that cow video. And I just said, let's all knock it off, because these guys are going to decrease their territory to this tiny size. They're going to be leaving this area undefended, and we're going to get budding of packs, basically. This was sort of like, wow, bad scenario here. Okay, so everybody cut it out. You know, nobody fed the coyotes. And they re-expanded all the way up to Green End Ave. You know, it's a good 5 square kilometers now again. And even pushed north into the next coyotes territory to the north. That's Rhodey Coyote if you go online. Rhodey, who had been established for a couple of years, then bailed. He went off the island. He's the first one that left the study area. And, well, I don't know yet. I haven't downloaded the collar yet, and I'm dying to know, but I'm having a technical hang-up on downloading.
How do they get on off the island, though? Do they
Swim at Stone Bridge
They
or go
swim?
over the Secundit River Bridge.
go over?
But he went all the way over and was shot in South Dartmouth. But what it's telling me is, holy smokes, you know, it could work. You know, have you seen Young Frankenstein? It could work. You know, we stop feeding the coyotes, and the packs expand, and they hit check off the ones that are surplus, or they get hit by cars, or they, you know, don't make it. But the population, the density comes down. So that's the mantra.
Are they
And
nocturnal?
that's not an important thing. What's that?
Are they nocturnal, or are they out during the day also?
During puppy season, they come out during the day a lot, or if people are feeding them in neighborhoods, you'll
But
see them
mostly
in the
they're
day.
at night?
Absolutely, they should be nocturnal because they should be nervous. We want nervous coyotes.
What about birdseed? Do they eat?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, they like birdseed, yeah.
That's the reason. What about raccoons and skunks? Do they like raccoons and skunks that aren't road?
They're
that are
not too
alive?
partial to raccoons, they will eat them. And skunks I've seen them eat more of, funnily enough. It was my choice. They try, but basically whatever's easy. Keep- Just go with it, you know, so if that turkey's gonna be good at escaping. And probably the reason the foxes come back is eventually the coyotes are selecting for a more alert fox. It just makes sense, you know, that they're less,
And are they
Have you
coyotes
witnessed their
of good?
hunting patterns? Have you seen them actually hunting? No.
you know, little, you know, if I get a chance to observe them,
So they
yes. I've
work-
seen
do they
puppies
work
hunting
together?
grasshoppers.
Really?
And yeah, that's pretty neat. But also I see them with my GPS points where they go. But I pretty well stay at arm's length from them, because the thing that's neat is I get this 24-hour report and I've not disturbed them at all. So they're doing what they do and I'm not influencing their behavior. So that's kind of a trade-off. But yeah, but the video, I see them in the video, but very little foraging.
And are they good
On fruit trees.
Fruit trees, yeah. One of mine was hit by a car, and he went and sat under a pear tree, and migrated. Yeah, I mean, sort of commuted back and forth between the bush and this pear tree for several weeks until his leg started to heal. Yeah, and fruit trees are big. If you really don't want coyotes in your yard in the fall, don't let your apples sit on the ground. They love them.
Why are the New England coyotes larger than the western?
Probably introgression from wolf genes, you know, a little bit. And
The wolves didn't like it, they do that.
there's a little fooling around, evidently. And yeah, I guess, you know, there's just a little bit of genetic material from wolves. And northern species tend to be larger than southern species. It's just a thing that happens to be true.
What is their approximate weight for the larger ones?
What would you think? This always gives me a kick. What do you think the biggest coyote you've ever seen?
70.
70? I hear 70.
I had one almost 100 pounds. He was huge.
100 pounds, huge.
Are you kidding?
And he's right in our back.
How'd they go around? That's a lot of weight.
Well,
Much
you
bigger
know
than a
what?
German
Here's the
Shepherd.
thing that you have to
my
bear in mind.
God.
And this coyote is actually from Tiverton. Isn't that gorgeous?
Oh.
My trapper got this one,
Oh,
and I just
could we
think
see
it's
that?
beautiful. He sells the pellets, but
Oh my
they're
God.
fluffy. So the heaviest one that I've ever gotten is 50 pounds. Big lumper coyote, 50
How long
pounds.
ago was that one?
Look at, I'll have to ask Spencer Tripp, he's my trapper, and it wasn't taken for me, but it's such a lovely coyote, I bought the pelt from him. These others are roadkills. This one was shot on Narragansett Avenue, Jamestown, a block from school, and I use it to explain to the town council that maybe they are an issue. And this is White Tip. This is my buddy. I can tell when I get to an audience. Yeah, he doesn't have much tail left. He got waffled on Route 138 Jamestown, crossing to that spot where the kibble, the cat food was. So yeah, but it's kind of neat. They look quite like wolves, have real variant color patterns. And this is his neck ruff. And so they do, and so they'll often look a lot taller. They'll stand that neck ruff up, and they
So
tend
is that
to.
one like a blonde one or a white one?
This is
I'm
the
really
Tiverton
curious
one,
how they
not an
look.
albino. This is a,
He's beautiful.
yeah, he's beautiful.
I
What
saw
about-
him alive. That was an alpha.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You have to tell me where you were, and then Spencer, well,
Taylor's
can
Lane.
you give me your Taylor's Lane?
Little country.
Let's
Taylor's Lane.
communicate,
Yep.
because I'll be curious.
The howl.
Probably a couple years
Oh.
ago. Yeah?
What is the howling about?
What is the howling about? They're very family oriented. If they get excited, they yip and bark. And they also have rendezvous sites with their puppies, so they'll just have a kind of a howl down, you know. And yep.
When you're doing that some nights, there'll be a real cacophony and then stops, nothing else. You don't hear another peep the rest of the night.
Maybe the neighbor right next to him shot a gun out the window.
It's very common.
Yeah,
Not me,
yeah, we
not that I
hear.
know of.
There's any reason?
They heard something, they got worried, or they left.
I haven't.
Not have
But they
either,
do,
not that I know of.
have you all heard it? It's sort of eerie sounds. Yes.
I have coyotes walking through my yard day and night.
Yep.
Mostly when the tide is in. I live on the edge of the marsh. And when the tide's in, they cut through my yard. Now, when I'm out there, if one comes out there, what should I do? That's what I'm
If you're
concerned
nervous about it? If you're nervous about it,
Oh, well, yeah, because I don't know what attitude they'd have.
go!
Okay.
Really?
What if
Big,
I,
mean, and loud.
at night, when I've had to, I sometimes have an old dog visit me. When I take him out at night, I have an air horn. And I have thought that if one came, that would be a way to scare it. Would it or not?
It's a great idea. It scares me.
Well, yeah, and they have little ones, and I have it in my pocket.
It's a super idea, and then in the West Coast, they have been coexisting with coyotes a lot longer, and a program in Seattle suggests a Pepsi can full of coins or rocks, you know, and shakers. Sometimes it's hard for people to yell at such a pretty animal, you know. It's a weird thing. You almost don't want to disturb them, but on the other hand,
Protects you and them.
What about,
yeah, the best favor you can do for a coyote is to wing something at him when you see him,
what
you know,
about
or
rabies?
scare
Tell us
'em.
about rabies. Are they affected by that?
Yes, we've had our first case in state, and the Cape has had a bunch of rabies issues, as has Connecticut with coyotes. But in general, they're not as susceptible to the raccoon rabies, which is the prevalent strain. 10 management suggestions. Don't just kick the road kills off to the side of the road. Let's develop strategies for farmers to dispose of livestock. make it illegal to feed animals outside without being fined, illegal to feed feral cat colonies, and if you insist on feeding them, bring them indoors and then let them go, but know that it will not be forever because the coyotes will get them. And so we're now working with the 4 municipalities within the study area, Jamestown, Portsmouth, Newport, and Middletown, to implement this plan, but this could work for you guys too. And now we want to monitor to see what's going to happen to the territories, see whether we see a change in coyote numbers once we get everybody on board as far as not feeding coyotes goes.
Then we'll have more in Tiverton, right?
Well, maybe compared to us, but we could play the same game here. So this is a thank you slide to all our great funders so far, and also this is Spencer, who got that Tiverton coyote, but this is Mrs. Prince's Coyote Hazard, and here's Ralph, and that's Mrs. Prince's house in Newport. And that's that slide. That's all there is left. Did I bring this trap? I don't think I brought it. They've got a, okay, have the traps ever gotten different animals? Rarely. I got a raccoon once that was mad as a hornet. Anyway, he was fine. So that we don't get any kinds of different animals, we put on this special trip pan that's called a pause-eye trip, which only depresses when at a heavier weight. So our traps would catch something, say, it catches like 25 to 50 pounds and up. But, so we set our traps where we won't catch things, like dogs. We make sure that we're in areas where big dogs won't go. But also we use lures. And so the animals that are going to get caught are sort of drawn away from the trap by the scents. And they're not food-based, so it doesn't tend to bring in domestic animals. But cats wouldn't get caught, for example. And as I say, we set where there aren't dogs.
Do we have any college in Tiverton at the moment?
No, I haven't been able to expand the study here, but it would be a really neat thing to see if we could get some mainland sites in the future. And we've got to grant in an application into to sort of go on to mainland areas in the next couple of years. Yeah?
What about ground nesting birds?
Sorry. Ground nesting birds, yeah. They raise heck with plovers.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, they're a problem with plovers. And, but, you know, it's part of the system, so. But you don't want supernumerary coyotes if you're trying to raise plovers at the same time. Yep.
Any feeling for the coyote population on prudence islands?
But not a lot.
Want to have been meaning to collar there, but funding's been a problem.
We're reading about the deer population, prudence declining.
Yeah, and we're all wondering, and also the deer population on Jamestown supposedly is lower this year, and we're wondering if some of our roadkill-eating coyotes have started preying on deer.
That's not a bad thing because we've got Lyme disease in Tiverton.
Right, so do we,
If we diverse our
yeah.
deer population, that's going to help control that.
Sounds good to me.
Do you collar multiple coyotes in the same pack?
Yes, but not all at once. We only have one pack representative
That's what I
at a
wondered.
time.
You're only tracking one at a time per
So it's
pack.
a sequential thing, yeah, and, yeah.
You were mentioning DNA studies.
Yep.
Would they be able to show if there's hybridization between dogs and coyotes?
Yeah, and there's actually been a lot of work on that previously, and there is a little bit of, just sort of like the wolves, there's a salting in there. But yes, it would, but the level we're looking at is going to be mostly at a few DNA, through few genes that are going to be telling us individual differences. So our work would be more fine-tuned than that, but our data could be used to determine that. Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I haven't, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about the coyote, the size of the coyote population being contingent on the food supply.
Right.
And I know other mammals, for example, in rats, if you control the food supply, the rat population goes down. It's better than if you poison them. But it's the same, what I'm asking is the same mechanism where they reabsorb the young. Do you happen to know, is that common across
Yeah, well,
the
rats
population?
definitely, there's a lot of data on stress in rodents. Garrett Hardin did a lot of that work, but if they, was an age ago, but yeah, if you stress out, I think it was voles that he worked on, if you crowd voles, they'll resort their young, or they'll cannibalize them. But I'm not sure that it's that common. I'm not sure it's as common, I mean, in... What?
Rabbits resort their young.
Rabbits do?
If they have too crowded a room.
Okay, so, yeah, well, those animals that do that, yes. Yep.
How many collars do you have installed at a given time?
Well, we try to have 10 right now that we finished our baseline data for Aquidneck Island. We're just working with probably 3 to 4 on Jamestown. And, but we like to have 10 going all at once. It's really fun.
And what do they cost each?
$2,500.
Oh my God.
That's good, yeah.
Is it correct that they're in every community except Block Island, New Shore? Rhode Island community?
I guess. And they're not in New Shoreham, right?
What was the question?
Do they live in New Shoreham? And yeah, they haven't gotten to New Shoreham, Block Island. That's interesting.
Do you have plans to expand outside of the island?
Would like to. It's all funding dependent, but we definitely want to follow up on the data post management initiatives.
And
Like,
how much money would it take? What kind of funding does it take if you were to launch, saying that for Tiverton and Little Compton? What would it take?
well, why don't we talk about it? Because if someone's interested, we'd definitely like to talk about it. Because we have no mainland data so far.
Does anyone have any mainland data?
Yeah, there's radio collar data from Cape Cod. John Way works down there. But it's harder because it's not a continuous record 24 hours, you know? So he goes out and depending on how exhausted he is, he stays out as much of the night as he can and then no more data until he visits again, you know? And so, yeah, this is a really wonderful way to look at fine scale resource use in coyotes, and it's never been done. So this would be the first mainland site if you decided.
One of my questions was how islands have an artificial, it's not even an artificial boundary, it's a boundary.
Yes.
And how does your data on the size of territory that they patrol and density and those figures compare with a mainland?
Coyote territory size has been really variable in the literature, so I really want to do it and figure it out and see. That's what, I think it's a great question. I suspect it's going to be similar because there are some studies that are comparable, home range size and territory size to ours, but it really has to be done. You know, so yeah, let's do Tiverton. Okay, yeah.
Do they fare all right in the winter when it's bitter cold?
They fare super. They've got the best coats in the world, and yeah, they do really well. They sleep outside, rain, snow, sleet, or hail, and they seem not to mind.
I have a question too.
Yes.
Is there any chance, since you can teach them to eat certain things, it would be good if they ate more deer? Has there been any thought to using roadkill to sort of train them to?
There's been my thought for sure. I'm on your page. But you know, this is just a 6-month-old idea. But boy, try telling that to DEM. You know, it's a process. Put it that way. We're having these conversations, and I said it in front of 2 DEM, the second down guy in DEM last week, and you know, I just sort of feel as if someone's going to yell, heresy, or something.
Other hunters against it.
You know, well, DEM's a little bit,
Nervous.
yeah, yeah. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, I think the more people, I mean, we need to try that. I think we should try that in a place where people don't mind trying it.
I have a great idea where you can try it.
Okay, I think it's a super idea. I do. I think that's the next place we're going. Yeah. Okay, shall we make it the last?
Do coyotes have any rights, or are they sort of a free-for-all out there? My neighbor has a dog that keeps on a run, and I noticed yesterday the male coyote came out about 50 yards away, and they completely ignored each other.
Yeah.
But now, if there's a pack, I mean, if they're having babies and there's going to be 4 or 5 of them, at the end of the summer, are they going to think about ganging up on this dog, or are they kind of...
I would be surprised. How big's the dog?
It's a German Shepherd.
Well, it'll probably be okay, but
Yeah.
it's gonna, yeah, they probably have it worked out. Is my guess. But during the puppy season, the parents are hunting 24 hours a day. And that's why you see them so much. They're trying to support 5, 6, 7 kids, and they're going out, you know, they look ragged,
Too much overtime.
Let's get Lillian out of